Lucia Cossu, voiceteacher here with the news from the studio because it will be a pretty busy August. I had some days free out of work and now we get back. I'm going to present at Eurovox2026 in Lucerne at the end of the month, and it will be very nice because I'm talking about something that I don't usually talk that much out of my daily studio. I clarify this with my students. I don't really usually present that in conferences, that it is on perceptions. Yeah, in the voice series you'll find other episodes on perceptions because perception is a huge, enormous topic. And we can see it in so many perspectives, and of course I don't have the knowledge to have a taken on all of that, and probably nobody has it, but we have to sum up our expertises because it's a huge topic. It's a huge topic for who? It's a huge topic for singers and for my colleagues, because as you know, or if you don't, now you're going to know, I work on the contributions, direct, and precise, of the musculoskeletal system, the general musculoskeletal system, in voice production, in voice quality, in voice physiology, and as tools and contributions for spontaneous phonation, artistic phonation, and when it becomes dysfunctional. Also saying, my work is where are the minimal requirements to have a physiological voice, a physiological phonation. Also said which are the contributions of the musculoskeletal system that we have to put into the voice model. I would also say that the larynx in itself is a musculoskeletal system, and the rules and the laws applying to the general musculoskeletal system, they apply also to the larynx. The larynx is more studied, even if not with that perspective. The general musculoskeletal system, it is studied but not with that precision. Why perceptions? Because what puzzles still my colleagues, voice teachers, and, for example, still some speech therapists, but not anymore, doctors and researchers and scientists of the voice, is that what I talk about does not manifest in the perceptive state as usually or intuitively understood or easily understood. Also said, knowledge and my practice say some things in the students and in yourself, it puzzles you because their perceptions are, we have to look at them in a different way. And the first point that I'm going to talk about at Eurovox, it is, why do we need perception to guide the musculoskeletal system? Do we need perceptions, or do we need that the brain can gather the information from the musculoskeletal system? And I will show you how one doesn't erase the other, but one, which are the perceptions, will come later as a friend of us. And this is why we have Friedrich Alexander say perceptions lie. This is going to be also under another perspective. The other perspective is that our voice function is done mostly by 4 anatomical systems: the respiratory, the digestive, in my practice mostly, and not only in my practice, still also, and not only this, still, the pharynx constrictors and their specific roles and training that we can develop in some ways, and I presented that at the Voice Foundation. The nervous system, yes, of course, sympathetic and parasympathetic, the autonomous nervous system, the vagus nerve, as you want, the general musculoskeletal system, and the larynx system. All those have some kind of precise functions that need for us to understand also said the survival functions, because if we don't understand the biological survival functions, we are not going to understand how to use those at our advantage for voice, because usually they work in the other way, in the other sense. That's why at PVOC I presented a workshop onto the defensive veto. Defensive is everything that helps the structure to remain in its integrity, and survival functions are pretty strong on that. So we will see just on these two perspectives, with a lot of examples, some exercises, and I hope that my step of knowledge, this new field that now the field has recognized as not only valuable, but it has to be developed into academy and medical field, will puzzle you a little less, and you will start seeing it the friend that it is and the great ally that it is. Second news, in the same line, as you know, I presented in basic science on isometrics concept, but I also presented on voice function in music as a plyometric activity, and the breath as a spring-like quality also of the muscles and of the tissues out of the lungs. For the voice foundation, those, and isometric for the PVOC. And I am honored and very pleased that I've been invited by phoniatrists to speak for their APLA meeting in Istanbul next April. Also said, yes, the field is very open, is very interested in this, my 20th year pioneering with great results, for the step knowledge that this is. And so I'm thinking about what to propose them. I think on isometric, and especially how to find isometric, how to develop isometric, but especially I'm very honored and very pleased about that. So you see, I've been very busy. Third point for today, that is again can be really important. It is something that it comes out very often, especially for classical singers, and especially for singers who do not find their perfect place for singing. Also said, voice classification. I did cut a little short in the comments to some of my videos in saying the phoniatrists I saw, they all classified me as a contralto in very straight and direct. And some said, yeah, but you know, you sound like a soprano, you sound like a light soprano, then they corrected it. Then they say, but have you tried to sing as a light soprano? Because I was a light soprano, but they classified me as a contralto. The usual, if you're a singer or if you're a voice teacher, pulling on one side on the other, that happens for sometimes a very long time in singers. I would like you just to say one thing. In my case, I tried, because I don't believe into just go in one direction straight. Sometimes it is good to go just one direction straight because it works, it is quite clear, and in my experience, especially if you do pretty right and pretty well planned, voice will solve itself. Also said, it will show what it is when it is trained enough and going in the good direction. The huge confusion and discussion on the topic is that very often it doesn't start in the good direction. In my case, it didn't start in the good direction for some precise structural characteristic of mine and some emotional characteristics of mine. But what I find important, that it was important for me as a singer, and I find even more important to me as a voice teacher and voice coaching and singing teacher, is that we have to realize that the voice function has some capacity of adaptation. So it can mimic many different things, and not all are in the bad aspect of a successful and happy and correct development and finding the proper classification. Biology goes by redundancy also said we have many aspects contributing to something like classification, color, weight, capacity of being into an extension and the tessitura, that it is the part of the extension in which you provide really what it is professionally required. Having said that, when we have students, as in my case, which are usually beginners or young professionals or not yet professional, wanted to be professional, or professionals with huge problems, not solved by doctors or not solved by training, what it is the important point is to find enough physiology into something that is comfortable and applicable now. So it is the entrance point of your voice and your capacity and your understanding and your capacity of absorbing the work and the development that we ask, and of your character and your knowledge of the repertoire. The sum of all these ingredients make that it is the starting point of you, and this is the market, the surface in common, in which we can, without damaging your voice and without damaging your optimism into finding your way, getting into the market while you are developing and finding yourself. And this is very important, very, very important. Also said, you don't get where you start really all the time, but you have to start somewhere. And to start somewhere, sometimes it is even more important that to start somewhere in a physiological way is even more important than the end goal. Because starting somewhere and bringing step after step what you can into the plate and accepting what you can't for many reasons, and not because you are not good enough or not physiological enough, or because you haven't found the perfect teacher or the perfect. It is that sometimes it requires time, and sometimes you're never going to find the optimal or the ideal, but you're going to find the good enough to have a career, to have a longevity, to have a happiness, to have a market, to have your voice in reality matching your creative desires, your structure, your tools, your development, so that you're going to see that it is going to go where your voice is, but it doesn't have to start exactly there. And I'll make you an example that you have in the videos, the little part. When I talk about hypermobility, I talk about a specific student. They choose to be in the baritone repertoire. I could agree till a certain point, but I agreed on something. That was, it has a sense into the specific situation. It has not an absolute sense, but it has a sense into the specific situation. And since they have to be the one living with that, I can give a sense pointing that there are going to be some consequences, not for the voice, not for the health of the voice. Those I could assess that it could have a sense without damaging the voice and without blocking or stucking the voice into the successive development. Because this is crucial. This is the 0 point on which I work all the time. And it is no nuancing on that. This is no, the minimal requirements for your voice are, wow, it's my job and it's my really duty to do that. But after, in the first segment of our lessons, in the first period, the first 4 months, it was to give more skills, more sense, more capacities, more tools for this choice. Also saying that perhaps there could be an opening towards something different. When they came back, they had this opening that was making sense also, but still they have some specific characteristics for which also the other opening will not be the ideal one. But we don't need ideal, we need good enough. And good enough can do huge careers. And good enough, sometimes they are something really awesome. What I don't appreciate into the discussion of classification is the taking away reality to give absolutes, to give idealistic absolutes. That's not reality. That's not how we develop. That's not how we are going to win a path of happiness and of realistic career for singers. From where they start. They don't start from ideal, and they're not going to be better if we put ideal. We have to put reality, biology, tools, artistic tools, logics, plans, and the market. And the sum of those things give a lot of choices and a lot of possibilities in which nearly everybody can find his place. So, yeah, I explained, but then I did cut a little short because at the end it is, I know I'm a contralto. If I would have gone further into the career, I cannot say, but you know, I didn't stop for voice problems, I stopped for other kind of problems, interacting and erasing my general health. So without general health, you're not going to have a career because you're not going to have really a proper voice. It's too inflamed. But, again, let's put some reality into, and let's go on. Are we talk? I don't know if I'm going to do an episode on Eurovox. How is it going? Perhaps yes, perhaps after. But for now, have a good month of August and see you next time.